Welcome in, builders. This week we're taking a look at Middle Age Atlantis, Kings of the Deep, a nation that, while they've had some decline, they're in a pretty bitter war with other underseas nations. Plus, the meteorite crashing into the ocean didn't help them out at all. Have done pretty well for themselves, and it's a nation that has definitely started to change and adapt to the Middle Ages for better and worse in different areas. Let's take a look. When the star fell into the sea, the basalt city and the dark crystal were destroyed. The reign of the basalt queens was ended, and the surviving Atlanteans reformed the kingdom. Atlantis is an underwater nation of strange beings, resembling a cross between fish, frog, and human. Atlanteans never stop growing and will live for several hundred years unless killed. Atlantean society is organized into a strict hierarchy of size and age. The oldest and most cunning Atlanteans are trained as priests and mages. Because the Atlanteans find it difficult to use magic, they often capture human children and train them in magic in the crystal towers. The soldiers of Atlantis use spears tipped with living coral shards and wear armor made of coral chunks. The coral is poisonous and is cultivated solely for the purposes of war. So we can already see here, we've had to start bringing humans in, as I think we've started to see that's kind of a theme of middle age compared to early age, where we just don't have enough people. So we have to start bringing in human population to supplement not only just our workforces necessarily, but also even our army and even our mages and priests. That's already starting to show that wear and tear on these mystical races is starting to show. For national features, as a race, we are amphibious. For military, we have coral-armed infantry. We use shamblers, war lobsters, and we have no missile troops. Put an asterisk on that. For magic, we are very strong in water, and we're pretty strong in astral, and we have a bit of fire and earth. Our priests are powerful. We have a recruitable holy 3. For scales and blesses, we have a productivity limit of +1. We use standard forts of the era. Overall, a pretty good mix here. While we are kind of limited in the pathing of our magic, we're pretty good at all of these, so it's at least usable. We're not trying to like random into certain combinations that are really super rare, although our mages are, for the most part, kind of random. For sites, we only have one site. We have the Coral Towers. It enables us to get our cap-only units, and we can produce 5 water gems per turn. Very limited in that. Very limited in that. I would love it if we had at least a smattering of other gems instead of just water gems. However, water elementals still rule the waves, so if you want to rush water elemental, that gives you a lot of gems to throw around in the early game. Units and sacred. As you can see here, we have a really wide lineup of different units. However, it's one of those nations where it's kind of like minor changes on each one, and many of these are probably not going to see particular use. First up, we have the Atlanteans, starting with their militia. So this is the base Atlantean size 3 chassis. So for him, 7 gold, 2 resources, 3 recruitment points, very cheap. He is, of course, amphibious and has dark vision 50. Other than that, human or below human stats is pretty bad. Not a great chassis, if I'm being honest here. The militia in specific only has 8 morale, and he is wielding our coral spear. Coral weapons are all right. The nice thing about them, if you do damage to somebody, you get a weak poison, which is poison magic 5 armor negating. But you do have to at least get a point of damage to get that check. Overall, militia units, as a rule of thumb, are not particularly useful. Next up, we have Atlantean light infantry, which we can also get in coastal forts. This is pretty important. In early age, we didn't have any land recruitment, and that was a big pain. If you didn't get enough water real estate to get enough forts to get enough recruitment, you were relying on above water indies, which could be good, but usually isn't. So at least now we're going to start seeing that we have some troops that we can always get while we are above water. This one is the same chassis, but now we've actually been trained a little bit, so we're at least about human stats. We have a coral spear again. Now we put on a coral cuirass. Not the best protection, no hat or anything. And because of our cuirass, we have poison barbs. Poison barbs do poison if anyone is striking you with length 1 or lower weapons. Length 1 are actually a little more common, I feel, in Middle Age, because we're now seeing a lot more people use swords that would have previously probably been wielding spears. So this is a nice little bonus. It does come up time to time, but it's not like super duper amazing or anything. Next, we have the Atlantean Shield Bearer. This is a similar guy, but instead of putting on a chest piece, he now has a turtle shield. I guess you'd use this if you couldn't afford something else and were getting shot at. Meh. We still don't have ranged weapons, particularly going on underwater, so I don't see the use case there. Next, we have Atlantean Infantry. All right, this guy's finally figured out how to dress himself. So, same chassis, 10 gold, 12 resources, 9 recruitment points. He has the coral cuirass, he has a coral cap, and he has the turtle shell shield. So, overall, 10 on the body, 14 on the head, plus having a shield as a little bit of natural protection. This is, I would say, the first probably usable troop, although, like I said, you don't really need the shield underwater, but it does help even in melee, of course. So, to taste there, I suppose. Next up, we have the Reef Warrior. Do note that only this one so far has been called out as recruitable in Coastal, so these guys are not. Reef Warriors. Reef Warriors are pretty decent. We have the cuirass, we have the shield, we have the spear, but we've also grabbed a coral-tipped javelin. This is a really good javelin, actually. It's similar to a regular javelin, but we also have the poison on it. I like that, actually, quite a bit. As mentioned, we don't have any native ranged troops, so this is all the range you would get. Why would you care? Well, when you go on land and you have to fight barbarians, these are pretty good javelins to chuck into some barbarians. They have the length 3 weapons, so they can try to repel, even if they're not great at it. They're all right. They're all right. Next up, we have the Coral Guard. This is heavier version. We've moved up to a Coral Hauberk. Now we are at 12 protection on the body. For Middle Ages, that's like medium troops, so that's okay. But do note our cost is starting to rise pretty quickly here. 15, 15, 21. We're definitely paying more. Next up, we have Coral Guard. However, now we have a Coral Glaive. Still wearing the Hauberk, still have the Coral Cap. So this is a two-handed weapon, so 24 damage is nothing to sniff at, and it's slashing piercing. Remember that for non-piercing damage underwater, you actually take a penalty on the attacks because it's hard to swing things underwater. So you have a 50-50 chance of which damage type is rolled on each attack. These are still fine and they're still usable underwater, but just keep that in mind when you're thinking about glaives and how good they are and how they compare. Another thing I should call out, combat speed 7 here. If we look at our earlier guys, we're all at 8 or 7. We are really, really slow. We are really, really slow, and we don't have a lot of ranged stuff. So know that you're going to get peppered with magic and ranged attacks on the way into any fight. So keep that in mind. Overall, I'd say this guy's pretty good. He can hack through even the heaviest troops. I mean, we could at least go toe-to-toe with Olm. We probably wouldn't win, but we could at least hurt him. Next up, we move over to a new chassis. Now we're looking at Shamblers. Unfortunate here. We used to have some really cool Shamblers in the early age, and we have lost access to those. So this guy is known, I guess, for being strong and cheap. 20 gold, 1 resource, 25 recruitment points, 2 length 0 attacks at 10 attack, 15 damage. Maybe some guys on the flanks. Maybe if you're fighting things that are unarmored. I'm not loving this one. Next, we have the Shambler Guard. Similar to the last guy, however, we have put on sharkskin armor and a shield, and we've grabbed a coral club. Coral clubs are interesting in that this is a blunt weapon that also does the poison. And at 19 damage, we'll probably be able to get through most armored things. If I had to get a Shambler, this guy's better than the previous one. Do note, though, we're paying for it. 22 gold, 7 resources, 27 recruitment points. We have moved up to size 4 in this chassis. We have more HP, better strength. Still have amphibious and dark vision on Shamblers, by the way. Overall, a usable troop. Next, we have War Shamblers. We've moved up again in armor. Now we have the Coral Cuirass. Still no hats, though. And we're using the Turtle Shell Shield. We have a coral glaive at 27 damage, so very, very hard hitting, but still only 10 attack. And do note, you're only going to have 2 of these guys in a square, so your attack density is going to be garbage. Keep that in mind. Comparing this one at 2 attacks in a square to this guy with 3 attacks in a square, you're probably going to end up with better damage on the Atlantean Coral Guard than a Shambler, War Shambler. So just know that unless you're doing something else to help your attack out, that may be an important factor. Next up, we have a really cool unit in the Lobster Rider. We have an Atlantean. He's wielding a coral spear and he has a shield. I really wish he was wearing a little bit of armor. He is one of those rare units that the Rider lets the mount down with his 2 protection on his body. The spear is nothing to write home about, although he's pretty decent with it. What you're really getting is a giant lobster, and that is an aquatic only. So note, you cannot take these on land. However, these are pretty good. You don't need an absolute ton of them. They've got 20 protection on the lobster, who takes the vast majority of the square up, so he's more likely to be hit than the Rider. He has a pincer, which he's not particularly good at, but we don't care because he tramples. So a size 6 trampler, abysmal magic resistance. So be careful who you're fighting against with these, because if they're using magic save attacks, you're going to be in a world of hurt. They do have dark vision. They're undisciplined. So if you lose your Rider, they're going to do whatever they want. And they're very stupid. So they will randomly attack your own troops if they've lost their Rider. Still, I do like these guys as combined arms with a line of troops, and then these flank in the side and trample. Do note they're very slow tramplers, though. Very slow at speed 8, so they match your troops with their slowness, I suppose. Usable, all the caveats of tramplers apply here, though. It's going to suck when they trample through your guys. Make sure you have your leadership not in that path if you can help it. Your timing is going to be key. Because the Riders are so weak, you really don't want these guys to hit and have to be in sustained combat for a couple rounds before the rest of your troops. You really want your troops to take the first attack and then these guys to hit. That would be ideal for you. Next up, we have our Sacred, the Mother Guard. This is a cap-only Sacred. As is kind of the theme with most of the Middle-aged nations we've looked at so far, it's okay. It's okay. It's nothing to write home about. 40 gold, 23 resources, 41 recruitment points makes it relatively expensive. However, I feel like Atlantis does want scales, so this isn't too bad. We have good HP because we're Shambler chassis. We have good strength, good attack, good defense. Those are all great things here. We're size 4. For defense, we have 12 on the body, which is all right, although nothing to write home about. We are Sacred, Amphibious, we have Dark Vision, we have the Poison Barbs, and we have Bodyguard 3, which is really high, actually. That's a really high bodyguard. I think that's as high as most things go. He is wielding a Coral Glaive, like we saw before. At least now he's up to 11 attack, though, so he's a little bit better with it. He's equipped with the Coral Hauberk, the Coral Cap, and the Turtle Shell Shield. So exceedingly similar to a War Shambler. However, he's put on a hat. Otherwise, he's pretty dang close. These guys are all right. Depending on your bless, they can take a hit. They're not like unarmored or anything. However, slow, combat speed 7, not like stupendously protected or defensive. And we're not like super high on attack density, although we do hit pretty hard if we do. I find these guys to be usable, but nothing remarkable. Finally, for troops, we have the Soldier of the Deep. Can only be recruited in coastal forts. So these are some of the humans that we have either got to join us or forced to join us. They are a human chassis that has poor amphibian. We have ringmail cuirass and a reinforced leather cap. Do note the ringmail cuirass here is not marked as iron, so I don't think that rusts. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not marked that it rusts. So I don't remember seeing anybody rusted. I'm going to assume that that's the case, which means you can use these guys to move underwater, which ups their mobility quite a bit. Note that we have moved up to human speed, so now we have combat speed 12. We're much faster. Our morale still 12, so that's an okay troop. Just to compare here, 13. So we're about as good as our other troops on morale. We wield a coral spear. Overall, this is like a mid a very mid-human chassis, but it's something we're guaranteed to be able to recruit on the surface, which makes it pretty valuable for us. And we at least have the bonus of being able to move around through the water, which increases our mobility on the map pretty significantly. Our spears, okay, it's okay. I really wish these guys had a shield or a length 4 weapon, but it's all right. It's all right. We're adapting. We're adapting to our circumstances. Just to show off here, my test game in the background, we look at the recruitment of a coastal fort. You can see the Indies that were here, and then I have my choice between Atlantean light infantry, so a guy with just a chest piece of armor and a spear, or I could have the Soldier of the Deep. And I feel between the two of these, I'm probably taking the Soldier of the Deep. I don't know. I could go either way. 1099, 1069. Maybe it's to taste. I don't know. These guys at least have hats on. Either way, neither of these are like you're happy to recruit these. You're just happy you have something to recruit here. Heroes, Commander, and Prophet. For heroes, we have 2 heroes. We have the Coral Prince. Nothing particularly remarkable here. He's a Water 1, Priest level 2. He's got the standard Atlantean traits, decent HP. He has a Coral Glaive that he's pretty good with. Otherwise, not much to say here. We have the Seer King. He is a strong mage at Water 4, Astral 3. He has Cold Resistant. He has Fortune Teller. He has Gift of Water Breathing. Gift of Water Breathing allows you to take non-amphibious troops below water. Do note they fight as if they are poor amphibians, so they're not particularly great at it, but at least he can do it, and he can do 250, which is a lot. And he has Void Sanity. Void Sanity means that if you are in a Dominion, which gives you Insanity, you have a better chance to save against that. Otherwise, nothing particularly interesting. If you read his stuff here, he might be keeping a star spawn locked below the Coral Tower, which is kind of an interesting lore thing. For commanders, we have an okay lineup here. We have our Scout returning from Early Age. Nothing particular to note here. He's essentially an indie scout. He has the Coral Knife. He's usable. We have the Shambler Chief, can also be recruited in coastal forts. Not a good leader. He's not armed. He's not armored. He doesn't have a shield. He has mediocre leadership. Does have 2 attacks at least, but beyond maybe building a fort, I don't particularly like this guy. Next, we have a Consort. Much better leader here. We've moved up to leadership 100, which is pretty important. We're 1 recruitment point, so you could get 2 of these guys out from a fort in a turn. 160 gold, 23 resources won't break the bank. He is a priest level 1. He is sacred. He's got the amphibian, dark vision, and poison barbs. He is using the heavier armor and the glaive. I like these guys. Do note they're very slow, but that's fine. They can defend themselves. They can take an arrow. They're a fine leader. Nothing too bad. Nothing spectacular, though. Next, we have the Coral Queen. This is our recruitable Holy 3. Do note, this is not cap only, which is very, very nice. Having recruitable Holy 3s makes me much more inclined to take an aquatic or even an immobile pretender than I might otherwise be for a water nation, because most thrones are going to be on the surface, and being able to have multiple people be able to help with that is great. Holy 3s are good for preaching. They're good for just combat magic. They're good for getting their blessings out. And we've gotten smart enough to actually get dressed before going out, unlike in the early age. So has at least a little bit of extra protection there. We can see here 10 on the body, 14 on the head. Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. If we look at total values, 18, 21, pretty good. Pretty good. Next, we have the Mage of the Deep. This is our generic recruit anywhere underwater mage. He has Water 2 and a random of Fire, Water, Earth, or Astral. For 11 research with 184 upkeep, he is not efficient. He is not efficient. That being said, Water 2, especially underwater, is a pretty usable pathing for combat. So you're probably going to end up needing to get some of these guys. 230 gold's a bit pricey for this, but it's okay. He does have some gift of water breathing if you need to move troops around. Next up, we have the King of the Deep. Again, notice this is not cap only. He's expensive. 385 gold, 5 resources, and he is 4 recruitment points. I should note our Coral Queen was also 4, so those are both soul to recruit, even if they're not cap only. He is Water 3, and he gets +2 levels of a linked pathing, Fire, Water, Earth, and Astral. So you're guaranteed 2 of one of those, which is nice to have it linked rather than random. So we're really looking at what cross pathing are you going to get, and or you could get a Water 5 off of these guys 1/4 of the time, which is pretty powerful. Again, he costs 308 gold for 15 research, which is not efficient. He has cold resistance, and he has Gift of Water Breathing. Next up, we have our cap only, the Deep Seer. This is one of our human initiates. He has Water 3, Astral 2, Priest level 1. Unfortunately, he is old age, and he's decently old. He has Fortune Teller 15, Gift of Water Breathing, and some cold resist. Overall, this guy's all right. Note how expensive he is, though. 445 gold for an old mage. That hurts a little bit. I really wish that was a bit cheaper or he wasn't so old. We look at upkeep, 178 gold per year for 15. This is the closest to efficiency I think we've seen so far, but still not. Having access to Astral 2 is nice. We can Mind Burn right off the get-go, and we can Communion. That makes for a pretty decent mage. We can power up and do some bigger Astral things if we need to, or just get into some big water communions. Next up, we have 2 mages that are Coastal Fort only. We have Initiate of the Deep. Not stellar. He has very limited combat uses. However, for 65 gold, not slow to recruit, you get 7 research for 52 gold a year. So finally, we've hit somebody who is actually pretty efficient. We would sure like Alquills on these guys to make them more efficient, but we would have to luck into air to do that. Finally, we have the Witness of the Deep. Again, a Coastal Fort only recruit. He is 2 water and an astral, so this is going to be probably your communion slaves if you get to choose. They also have the Fortune Teller, which is nice. 11 recruitment for 11 research for 92 gold per year. This is probably your preferable researcher because you can repurpose them into a combat mage. And even if they're not communing or they're communing with just themselves, they can do fine things here. We can do a small communion and do Falling Frost if nothing else. Do remember that water also has some fatigue play in thaumaturgy, which could be pretty useful depending on what's going on the battlefield. Overall, an okay mage lineup, although water is still not the strongest path. We are probably looking to these guys for some cross-pathing. Unfortunately, generally speaking, if he lucks into the astral, he's just astral water, which our other guys do for about the same price, or even a little cheaper with these guys. And on this guy, same thing. If we luck into the astral, it's just astral water. So I do think that if you can get into some of the communion gear, that would be really helpful because we could get some other pathing into some communions. Who would I make my prophet? Because we have Holy Threes, this isn't too important of a choice. I think you could easily go with a consort just to have a well-protected one. Although, frankly, the mothers are not bad with their 18 protection. If we look at him in his actual protection, 16, 18. So she's actually more protected. It's just a slow to recruit. If you did want to invest the slow to recruit time for it, though, you could get a Holy Four. And fanaticism wouldn't be bad. We are mostly rocking 12 to 13 morale. Getting a +2 over the whole battlefield definitely would be a benefit for us. Another thing I want to call out here, if you look at our mage lineup, sacred, not sacred. Sacred, not sacred. Not sacred. Priest only. We have a kind of an awkward amount. Some of our better mages are not sacred. So if you're taking a mage bless, it's really only applying to our cap only and our coastal only. I'm not in love with that for a mage bless. That being said, we do have astral, so if you're trying to do magic save type things, maybe you could go like magic pin and some reinvigoration. I don't love those though. Something to keep in mind when we were looking at our spells. As for national items, we have no national items. As for national spells, fortunately, we only have one national spell, and it's not great. At 6 Conjuration, we can summon Monster Fish. We do have the 3 water natively to do this, and it only costs 6 water gems. We're going to be drowning in water gems, so that's not too bad there. And it's only going to give you a single Monster Fish. Let's take a look at that chassis. Monster Fish are pretty good. They are aquatic only, unfortunately, but they have Fear. They have 128 hit points. They have 12 natural protection, and they have a special attack of Swallow. It's an area of effect 1, and essentially you just eat them. And if you don't get killed within a couple rounds, you digest them. So it's kind of sort of like Trampler, but better. I believe you can only swallow things that are smaller than you, but we're size 10. So other than other size 10s, we can totally do that. These are usable, actually. What you're going to want to do with these guys is point buff them with Ethereal. With Body Ethereal, 128 HP that actually has some protection behind it is not bad. And note, we are not Tramplers. So you can have your line of troops in front, and then these guys can push their way through, and then they'll be sharing not a square, but at least they'll have friendlies surrounding them, hopefully, while they swallow up whole squares of troops. These are actually pretty terrifying. For the most part, I don't think there's anything underwater size 10 other than gods and maybe some rare summons. So yeah, I actually like these a lot, but it's Conjuration 6. Yeah, you get one of them per cast, and you're going to be using a pretty pricey mage to do it. Yeah, it's aquatic only. If only they weren't like this a fish. If they were something else that could be amphibious, that would be so much better. But they're usable. Will we do it? Meh, probably not, unless we get in a really terrible underwater war. So unfortunately, for magic-wise, very disappointed here again. I would have loved to see some more unique magic, especially for such a unique race here. It's disappointing that we didn't get anything else. For other research for our nation, since we have Astral, that means, of course, we're going to want to grab Communions. In addition, remember that we have in Thaumaturgy some water spells that don't see a ton of use, but they can be actually pretty good. So Sailor's Death is the beginning of that line. Requires 3 water, which we can natively do. It's an area of effect 1 that's kind of precise. It does 14 plus armor negating damage. That's not bad. That's not bad. Like, if you're looking at a very heavily armored troop, let's say Ulm, it's a magic resist negate spell, which they're not good at. And 14 plus damage is plenty to kill most human chassis. Just note, there's a lot of caveats here. Doesn't affect water breathers, doesn't affect undead, doesn't affect inanimates, cannot be cast underwater. So there's a lot of things that hold this back, but as a direct damage spell that's air of effect 1 for only 20 damage, you could do worse than this, and it's only at Thaumaturgy 3, which isn't terrible. In addition, we can get Fire 2 randoms, and Battle Fury would really help us out a lot, because our troops don't have particularly great attack values. So that would be something pretty useful there. If we go up further, we can look at Curse of the Desert. This is a fatigue spell. So it's magic resistance negates, and it hits them with 2d8 fatigue damage every turn. It is a magic resistance plus DRN versus a 22 to negate the effect. So if they fail their first save and they get affected, then they need to have magic resist plus a DRN up to 22. So most things have, let's say, 10-ish. So 10-ish plus a DRN, you'd have to roll 6 and 6 to get up to 22. So this is really hard to save against, is kind of what I'm saying, especially if you have a 10 MR. Do note that magic resistance or magic pen doesn't help this roll. It only helps the initial roll. Once you get to 20 fatigue, you start taking combat penalties. And this is Area of Effect 5. 30 fatigue is a little bit high, but we can get higher than Water 3, so that's not too bad. I don't hate this spell. It's interesting. If you were to compound this with some other things, like make them fight in the cold, add some cold fatigue spells, add something like Rigor Mortis, some sort of fatigue play, this becomes much more deadly than it otherwise might look. Beyond that, if we go further, We can hit him with Serenity, which turns things off of Berserk, and it also hits them with some combat penalties, which is whatever. Not in love with that one. In enchantment, we don't have the best water things. Vile water is something of note. You get gelatinous cubes, which have kind of a swallow hole type thing there. Friendly currents is really nice. This gives us extra defense and I believe combat move speed underwater for a whole battlefield. Pretty nice. We also have Quagmire. This is one of those things that would be really nice to pair with some of the fatigue play. All units without swamp survival get -1 attack, -1 defense, +2 encumbrance, and minus some speed. So this would affect us too. However, perhaps the fatigue will hurt the enemy more. Could be a play there. Grip of Winter. We get frost clouds all over the battlefield. Now, unlike early era Atlantis, we don't have a lot of troops that have frost resist. So unless you're going to buff yourself, this is going to hurt you as much as it's going to hurt them for the most part. In construction, I think water boosters would be really nice. In addition, astral boosters and communion items would be really handy. In evocation, we actually have some stuff here. I think our best magic is the water fire cross paths, not only for geyser, but for the acid spells, and specifically for acid rain. Acid rain is relatively easy to cast. Our smaller Atlanteans can do it if we get them a water booster, and our big boys can do it if they roll into a fire. It is range 30, area of effect 6, and it's plus on water. So if you get the water higher, you can get more there. It is 30 fatigue cost, but it is 12 acid damage. I don't know of many things that have acid resistance. It's armor piercing, and it's going to damage armor with rust. And this is pretty good. We have frontline troops who have enough HP to survive a friendly fire incident. And 12 damage is going to be very brutal for humans. And it is one of those spells that it pours down from the sky, which I think what that means is things like mounted units, it'll hit both the rider and the mount. I think that's how that works. Like a lightning bolt will do the same, I believe. And there's some other like beam pillar type spells that do that. So this is a pretty powerful one, but you're only looking at a quarter of your guys being able to do it. So realistically, what are we looking at? Well, it's probably going to be Falling Frosts. In addition to that, don't forget we also have Rain. If we're fighting enemy units who are focused on fire, Rain is pretty nasty for them. And again, that would combo really well into fatigue plays because that's going to fatigue them out quicker there. Falling Frost, as mentioned, and we may need to do that in communions for some of our guys. Stellar Cascades is not a bad one. And we have Astral 2s that are able to be recruited. Big size here. Armor piercing, magic resist for half. So you're always guaranteed to get some damage. And it's fatigue damage. So again, just playing into that fatigue play. Cleansing Water at 6 is another one. It only affects demons and undead. However, we're in the Middle Ages, so we have plenty of demons and undead to fight. It's air effect 5+, armor negating, and its damage is 5+. Note here, it's not talking about any saves. So against undead, Cleansing Water is absolutely brutal. If we're casting this with water 3s, it's going to be area effect 6, and it's going to be damage of 6+, or well, 6 with the water 3. But I mean, heck, we could have a water 5 guy casting this even. So this is pretty brutal against things that it can affect. We also have Ice Strike. Another pretty interesting one. Leaves a cloud, does plenty of damage. Do note it's not piercing or anything here. So heavily armored units are going to have trouble getting into that. We could have guys that we could boost into Acid Storm. This is a little bit more iffy, though. I feel like this is like a battlefield wipe that you're going to cast it and maybe have like a Ring of Returning to get out of there. That would require a Ring of Returning and a water booster, because if we have a water 3 fire 2 guy to cast it, you cannot cast that many gems. So we would need a booster, but this is a pretty good little screw you giant army. You could cast this and then Ring of Return out, hopefully, with the damage that the spell does to yourself. Could be interesting. In Alteration, we have Water, which is kind of a mid alteration path, I would say. We have Gooey Water, which is pretty interesting. We can do big slimes on enemy troops. We have Freeze, we have Fire Resistances. We have liquid body. Liquid body is pretty nice. Makes your troops even slower in combat, but makes it so they don't take afflictions. We can hit the people with Worgen Winter. Can be a pretty nice remote spell. We have tons of water gems, so a way to use them there. Beyond that, Manifest Vitriol. These are interesting. These are ethereal lions. Pretty good, actually. Those are pretty good. And we have guys, our cheaper Shambler mages could cast this. I could totally see using those. I could totally see using it. I don't think this can be cast underwater, though. Yeah, cannot be cast underwater. So you'd have to get on land to be able to do that. But I do think that'd be a good use of gems. Yeah, we could debuff people. We have the bigger resistances. So here we're granting weapon resistances, which is pretty nice. Wound Fiend, which is pretty nice. We lower strength, but if you're doing this to like glaive troops, that's fine. You're still going to hit plenty hard. So I actually kind of like those spells if the game were to go on long enough, and you can easily cast that. And out of Conjuration, Water Elementals. This is the big one here. There's lots of water-only summons you can do, and maybe you do that. Like Krakens are interesting. School of Sharks is kind of like Howl, but underwater only. I think the big one to call out in Conjuration, though, is Voice of Tiamat. And this is so good, this might be worth rushing your research for. Voice of Tiamat requires a water 2, so we can easily do it. 8 gems, so we can pretty easily afford it. And what it does is it searches for all elemental sites in an underwater province. So I think it searches for water too. In fact, let's check because I've been casting it. Yeah, it does. So you search for at strength 9 for fire, air, water, and earth. I really like the idea of rushing that. In the early game, get out one of your cap only guys to get out and site search for some astral, because that's not going to search for astral for you. And while you're doing that, you'll find some more water gems, because Voice of Tiamat is expensive at 8, but I definitely think that's worthwhile. And if you're going to go all the way to here, maybe you go all the way to Monsterfish. So you could do something like Thaumaturgy 1 or 2. 2 would get you Mind Burn. You'd go Alteration 3, or maybe you go Con 6 and then Alt 3, so you can buff that. Also note, you can summon Bishopfish there. Could be good, although we already have Holy 3s, but these are no upkeep Holy 3s. Shark Attack, too. During the battle, as there is more people being wounded, sharks arrive. It's one of those spells that they can attack us too, but generally speaking, I think it's worse for the enemies because we will script our mages to be safe, whereas the enemy probably will not. We could get Sea King's Court, another pretty interesting one. The Sea King, I believe, has Gem Gen 1 for water gems. So every one of these you get gives you some gem generation. And you get a Sea King, you get the armored guards, and I guess those are sea trolls versus just normal trolls. Either way, I do like troll. Sea King Court's fine. I think that's very usable. Moving beyond that, though, maybe you even go up to Living Water, because we could get Water 5 mages. And this one here will summon you multiple water elementals in combat. So you can really, really flood the world. And heck, this is a nation that may even consider Queen of Elemental Water, just because we can natively cast it pretty easily. So overall, not the worst magic ever. You at least can do some spells you don't normally see, but they're not particularly powerful. I really wish we had better access to the acid spells rather than only 1/4 of our troops being able to do it. So, bit of a downside there, unfortunately. All right, let's bring it all together here. Atlantis is a nation that probably is not as powerful as they were in the early age. We've lost a lot of the resistances. We've lost a lot of the high attack density. We've lost a lot of the efficient, cheap troops. However, we've managed to modernize a little bit. We're adding some new armor. We're getting some humans into here. Our magic isn't the best, but we're holding on. Like this is a pretty decent middle-aged mage, I would say. Even these guys, these are all right. We have Holy 3s, which is pretty nice to still see. We have a scout. We have 100 leadership, so we can do formations. We have a variety of troops, but honestly, most of them are not useful. We have okay mages, but we're limited in what we can do. I think one of the main things that Atlantis needs to focus on is trying to get landfall relatively early. I didn't in this game. The map I rolled up had Pelagia here, and Oceania here. So we were in a death struggle from like turn 2. We bumped into each other. So that was very unfortunate. I needed to get on land sooner. As you can see, the AI has done a pretty good job of just taking everything. And so I'm limited to this little bit of shore right here. And that hurts because when we need to fight the land nations, we need to have more recruitment and we need to have more mages and we need to have efficient research. And all of those things come from getting land forts. Getting the efficient research is going to be important. All the research I talked about was very widespread. So you have lots of paths you'd love to go down. However, it's pricey. It is really pricey. If we look at our troops here, like we're going to be wanting to get war shamblers probably. They're 25 gold a pop. That is not a cheap chassis. Our sacred, which we are probably going to want to be using, 40 gold a pop. Our mages underwater, 230 on a non-slow to recruit, 385 on a slow to recruit, 445 on a non-slow to recruit. We're going to be spending an absolute ton of money for magic. And it would really be nice to get just some cheap, efficient researchers up here on the surface going. You can see in this game, I just got this, so I didn't manage to do it. But we are all the way in winter of year 2. So we are essentially in year 3. And my research is 263, and that's only been recently because I've really been pumping hard on it, trying to get some more research out. So that is definitely a sore point, a weak point. I think you'd like to make landfall very quickly, get a couple forts to make it harder to push you back into the sea. Now, at least luckily, we're not completely reliant on that. Like, we can go up above water with our war shamblers or even some of our smaller guys. But we're very unimpressive. 8 attack is not going to win you wars on the surface. I think I honestly prefer this guy if I can get away with it. 10 attack and a javelin, more useful in my opinion. So, not the best troops. We're okay underwater, but on the surface, we're pretty low tier troops. We really are going to rely on magic. And to do that, we're going to need to get some research done. So all of that, again, just points back to getting coastal forts. And beyond that, we don't actually want forts that aren't coastal. So that's another weakness. Like, if we have other thrones, like this throne here, not going to get a lot out of this, in all honesty, if I were to take it and fort it. But you're still going to want to do it just for the protection. Maybe you luck out and you get some indies or some indie mages would be even preferable. So maybe just cross your fingers that that happens for you. Okay, let's take a look at pretender design. First up, let me show off the one I decided to go with. This is the first anchor, and it is a monolith. As I mentioned earlier, because we have Holy 3 recruitables that are non-cap only, I'm pretty comfortable with either an aquatic chassis or an immobile chassis while still being able to grab thrones. And the monolith was the cheapest chassis that's available to us, which we have kind of a limited amount. That allowed me to get the two things I wanted. Something to help our sacreds out and magic weapons. The astral magic is pretty common underwater, and it's pretty common for big, scary pretenders to have some astral, which means they are going to have body ethereal. And we actually are really going to struggle against a chassis that has body ethereal on it, especially a big, scary thing, because we just don't have magic weapons. So this gives us magic weapons on our sacreds and larger, which again helps the sacreds out, takes them to size 5. So we are at least being efficient in that. And it gives them just some more stats. They're just kind of big stat blocks anyways. In addition, for our sacred mages, it just makes them a little less likely to get got by a single arrow. Otherwise, not particularly useful there. If you are using sacred mages in your communions, having extra HP does make them a little less likely to get blown out by masters over abusing fatigue. So that's a tangential benefit. Pathing wise, this allowed me to go 5 earth, 5 astral, 5 nature. So we can do astral boosters, we can do earth boosters, we can do communion items, we can do nature searching. If we can luck into a few gems, we can cast Harspec. Nature isn't bad for us. We'd like to be able to probably do some supply items because we're going to need to lug around big armies because our troops are so garbage. Beyond that, We also could craft disease healing, which would be nice for our very expensive old mages with the cure-all elixir. And yeah, just other useful things that we could get there. Bark skin amulets, just whatever. Just the common things that we can see out of that. Also, there's some decent summons that can be done underwater with nature. You'll probably not have the gems to do it, though, but it's a thing. In addition, we could do riches from beneath, and we can teleport and gate around with this guy. So pretty versatile for a monolith. Just very basic. He's just dormant. He comes in, he researches and does some crafting, maybe a little bit of ritual spells. He's all right. He's all right. Let's take a look at our choices next. So it's going to be disappointing. Spoilers. This is our choice of pretenders. As I mentioned, just not particularly great here. Remember that for scales, we get productivity maximum +1 from our nation. I have seen people talk about going with extra order. So you could go order 3, productivity 3. So statue of order would be the way to do that. If you didn't want to be a mobile, you do have the Protogenos of the Sea. I don't know. I don't love this guy. He's aquatic only. I think he has a special thing that makes him like super aquatic only, if I remember right. Yeah. Is strongly connected to the sea and can never leave it, despite magical help. So don't think you're taking this guy on land. And he's just water 3. Like, that doesn't bring anything new to us. Titan-wise, our interesting one is Dagon. I like Dagon a lot, but he's always just way too overpriced. For a size 9, his gimmick is the swallow attack, in addition to some regular ones. But yeah, for 300 points, and he brings in Sloth, I'm not feeling it. Down in Dominion 2s, we do have the Worm. I do like the Worm as an expander. So if you felt the need to do that, this guy can do it. Make sure that you get him some self-buffing before you get out of the water. Preferably, I would go for Nature 2, so he can buff personal regen on top of his normal regen, and then like liquefy body and hard skin probably. So that's a lot there, but hard skin's not too expensive. Liquefy body, go like 2 water. In fact, here, let's just build one of these guys. Something like this, and then whatever you need to afford hard skin. Hard skin wouldn't be terrible for our mages. It would be okay on our sacreds. We even have 1 bless point left. I don't know, maybe, I'll just grab resilient for now. And this is awake. Nothing bad here. We probably want to go cold on this nation because we do have a little bit of cold resist, and we also throw around cold spells. So we would like that. And you're going to need some domain if you're going to do awake. Yeah, we got 1 left over. It'd be okay. It'd be okay. I could play this. Yeah, that'd be okay. You could do that. We have a Ghost King and a special chassis for him at 190 points. His death scales, that's here or there for us. He is cold. I'm not in love with it. At least he has way more HP than a normal Ghost King. Down in Dominion 1, we have the God King of the Deep. He's 160 points. I don't love that. He's Water 1, Astral 1. Only 27 HP. We have a Greater Seer of the Deep. He at least brings in Fortune Teller 75. That's at least something interesting. Maybe you grab this guy, take Astral high enough he doesn't get magic dueled, and his main purpose is just to research. But notice he doesn't have an Inspiring Researcher or anything. We have a Grand Hydromancer. He does generate 1 water gem, but I don't think we're hurting for water gems. And we have an Archmage, but he's riding a Giant Lobster, which is aquatic only. So I don't like that guy. I would definitely take a Grand Hydromancer over an Archmage here. Beyond that, you do have some other cool chassis, like a Sea Dragon at 140 points. Isn't too bad. Throw hard skin on this guy, and he's at 26 protection. That does meet my requirement. So we could consider that. Let me see how horrible this would be. We want hard skin. Not bad. We still do that. But look at our scales. Like, that's doable. Again, I'm looking at Liquefy Cell or Liquid Body and Personal Regen. That's why I'm taking those. With the hard skin giving us 6 protection, we're up to 28 before we self-buff anything. Liquid Body and Personal Regen is going to make him pretty steady. He does have Dragon Master, but I don't know what you can summon underwater with that. Notice he is aquatic, so you would have to get something to get out of water, or you could shapeshift into a greater seer of the depths. So that would be this guy. I think rather than him, I would probably take the Sea Dragon, in all honesty. For 60 points, you could do an expander, and then you could shapeshift into something that can go on land. Yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be fine. That's kind of interesting. I kind of like that idea. Overall, not great choices here. And of course, the dumb Demi-Lich. He exists. You could do it. Don't do it. It's boring. I try to resist all the time. I think that's okay. We have some choices here of Awakes. We have some Dominion 1s. We have some Dominion 4s that are usable. I think Titan-wise, we're pretty weak, though. I wouldn't take any of those. For scales, let's actually pop open who I created here. I do think we want production because we want to be pumping out lots and lots and lots of troops. And I think we want money. So order and production is, I think, the name of the day. You could shift this around a little bit, lower both of those some, grab maybe some magic scales to help our research and our casting. We do have access to some seers, so maybe we could go a little more misfortune. Maybe one misfortune and some magic or something like that. I definitely think there's wiggle room here. Also note we have Holy Threes, so you could go lower on Dominion and then Preach/Temple build to protect yourself. Do note, though, you're going to be in some pretty bitter wars in the beginning, so you're not going to have a lot of free money just floating around in the early game to do that. Okay, so in conclusion, I think Atlantis is a pretty decent nation, and I think compared to its compatriots underwater, it does all right. I don't think it's the most powerful, but I also don't think it's the weakest. We can do some land stuff that we couldn't do before. We still have some okay magic. We have a actually okay amount of choices for a pretender because we're not super married to a single bless. These guys will take whatever. We don't necessarily need a mage bless. You can kind of do whatever you want with that. So pretty versatile in that regard. Otherwise, a disappointing nation that they don't have some more unique spells or items. I really like nations that have at least a couple castable unique spells, and we don't get that here, unfortunately. All right, that's going to be it for early era Atlantis. I hope you enjoyed Builders. Leave your comments down below. Let me know maybe what your favorite underwater middle-aged nation is and how Atlantis stacks up to that. Let me know what you're looking forward to seeing on our Atlantis stream. I'm thinking it's going to be an all right one, and I'm thinking we'll probably use that custom map we used in early age or the donut. So let me know when you want to gen up a water nation map. What do you normally use? Do you random it until you get a good one and save it? Or do you just YOLO it and pick whatever from the generation? A couple weeks ago, we had a really bad map where we had a bunch of water nations and single province water ponds. So I'm a little leery about just total random. So interested in some feedback there. All right, builders, get out there and build a cool sandcastle, and I'll catch you in Atlantis.